Hi everyone. We are in conversation with Rahul Kulhari, who is the head of data science at Edge. I'm Anannya Debnath. I lead content at Edge, and today we will be discussing. The various challenges that organizations, employees are facing. If I could say, in terms of you know building up their capabilities for the next generation of work, right? So which could be their reactions to the pandemic, then efforts that the problems that organizations are facing today to facing today for engaging their employees effectively. What are the problems they are facing? We talk about that. We'll also talk about changing workplaces and the changing workforce. And then we'll talk about future transformation, what's in store for organizations, for candidates, their skill set, etc. So welcome, Rahul. Thank you for being with us today.
Thanks for having me, Ananya.
Thank you. So we'll begin. So Rahul, so what I want to ask you, right, is we spoke about these four things that organizations in India, globally, they're all facing these issues, right, in some context or the other, right? But what are the main things that need to be looked into in those specific sectors? Like, is it skill sets? Is it so employee engagement has a lot of things, right? It has learning and development. It has taking care of their mental, physical health, well-being. There are a lot of factors that are involved in it. So yes, if what reports say is that the first priority for organizations today, and those organizations who are people centric, right? The priority is the mental and physical health and the well-being of their employees in this pandemic. However, they also need to look at the other factors that hamper an employee's growth apart from their, well-being, which is more professional in nature, which helps them to get a perfect career path.
Sure.
Right. So if you could tell us more on those lines also.
Yeah. So I think these, as part, like, obviously industry has discovered and all these problems, and every company in a way, or every industry is trying to mitigate these problems and finding out the solutions of these problems actually, right? And one of the largest problem statements, obviously the problem statement start from the HR tools or HR systems which are used by the companies, like the ERPs, right, and the CRM systems, because the way these system has utilized in the past, and they were the system of the static records actually, right? Either they developed internally, or they have utilized external ERPs tool actually by keeping the certain things in the mind. These were the tools which were not designed by keeping the mind they will be enabling the certain data insight, they will be providing the insights, and they will be solving these challenges which industry has faced today. Now, so and which leads to the multiple other issues, and because of that employee engagement has come into the picture. But one of the things which companies has to focus on, how they can enable the better, how can they put the better HR systems into the pictures, or how can they utilize the HR systems. For example, I'm just going to quickly talk about one of the things which every company, large IT services based companies which we have seen, is focused on two specific kind of things, and where they spend good amount of times and money on that piece, and then the effort, basically the career architectures and the competency normalization and the competency structures which they do have, right?
Okay.
Because it becomes the source of the information for company to map their jobs and company to map their employees to those skills, competencies, and the roles actually, right? And by the time they are done with like obviously the companies does have the internal experts, but they mainly work with the third party experts. And because of the static behavior, what happens the time that experts are done with the changes, the environment has changed actually, right? So it becomes not relevant when it goes to the real users and goes to the real environment. It becomes no use of for the organization behavior, culture, and the people's or employees visibility actually, right? And becomes a challenge. Now how do they, I think that's where they need to start utilizing the tools and the products, um, and they have to utilize technology basically to provide the dynamic environment and the behavior which can serve the need of the time, and also look at the long term and the small term and medium term goals as well of the companies to enhance them. Okay, they're ready for the future as well, and they're ready for the current environment as well, and it is ready to serve to the people in the according to their need actually, right? And so that's where companies has to focus on these kind of products and tools or the technologies actually. Now once this problem is solved, then I think what does it look like to the second one of the largest problem statement which happens in the industry is basically the internal job boards actually, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because in the end, before attrition happens, people wants to look out the better jobs inside the company because that's more easier than anything. But today, if you look at the internal job boards, some companies doesn't have the internal job boards, which doesn't provide that visibility and transparency which can enable the growth, which can give a some kind of objective for people to look at the growth inside the company actually, right? And that's where today's the internal job boards are basically can't compete with the technology which is available outside, because they are they don't have the great user experience, they don't have the great personalized jobs recommendation based on the skills which people do have or aspiration which they do have actually, right? And that's where which leads to the obviously there are certain behavior and the policies the way they have designed, which leads to the environment of being not having the right kind of visibilities actually, like employees doesn't have the visibility on the jobs based on the policies which companies has designed because of certain circumstances. And it's so these create the unpleasant experience for the employees, and they don't see any futuristic growth, and which leads to the better finding out alignment in some other companies in some other environment and the culture. They leave the companies, and that's where leads to the attrition. So I think companies has to focus on internal job boards or some kind of tools and the technology which can provide the great user experienced personalized jobs and transparency about the policies and what are how does the company look at them from the jobs perspective, and how they can target to the next goal as part of their career growth. What are the possibilities inside the company? That's where the technology can really help them actually, right? And that's where like companies are today utilizing, right? Companies have started exploring and normally not developing internally, they have started exploring the different tools from the outside technology, and basically AI powered, because here I said personalized job recommendations actually has become very critical part of the tools and technologies for people to keep engaged with inside the company. So and with that, obviously the HR leaders and the company leaders has to understand the power of the AI and how it can enable the better engagement by putting the right technology product and the platform inside the company which can provide this kind of great experience, right? And yeah.
Sorry. So, Rahul, if I could ask you, at what stage is this thing in organizations today? Is it quite nascent? I mean, because as you said, that it is also a major source of attrition, that people don't have that kind of a visibility, right? So, how major is this issue today? I mean, uh, you know, how are organizations even realizing this? You know,
Yeah,
that
so I think
have ability, or there needs to be they need to do something to stop the attrition. They may have realized that they need to do something to stop attrition, but do they realize that this is one of the things that they need, that visibility of jobs within the organization, that how effective a mechanism it can be to reduce their costs and increase speed of hiring, because it's internal, right? So obviously a lot of processes will be cut. They know the employee, they are aware of his achievements, they know that whatever this person is talking, he has done this, right? But are organizations even realizing the importance of this today, and how, at what stage is it?
so so I think understanding, like, do organization are realizing the importance of that in one way or another way. They have started realizing that, right? Because internal job boards is a one of the important issue which leads to the attritions actually, right?
Mhm.
And see, I'll tell you how does it affect, and people don't know about the impact it is having on their professional growth actually. See, one of the reasons today, if you look at, some companies doesn't have the internal job boards, so some companies have the job boards which is very tightly connected with the HR based ERP systems or some different kind of systems. Now what happens, one of the challenge which leads to companies not able to hire people internally and internal mobility, and people are not able to align to the jobs or not applying to the jobs which are internally available, because obviously the transparency is not available, visibility is not there. But in a way, organization have to change their orientation to employee first. And what it will leads to today, like the point which you said, people do know each other, so which help them to close the positions faster internally, right? But I think that happens rarely, and that happens with specific set of the peoples. What an organization, the business leaders and the company leader has started realizing the value. If these people are going to leave, how the job, how the company, how the functions, how the particular business units is going to run actually. Now that's where the, like, the HR systems, the right kind of product, and the internal job boards has to go, some kind of tool has to come which solve both the problems actually, which means basically, previously, if you do look at the today's data, right, more than around 30 to 50% of the people doesn't put their information on that tools which they do have, and which leads to the offline activity which you communicated, like people talking about who knows what kind of skill sets. So they do have the mental records or the some kind of Excel based records, and they take into the pictures, but that's not a scalable approach actually. That is not going to help companies to come out of these kind of crises and come out of the employee engagement or the attrition of the 31% or beyond that actually. Because employees doesn't have any lever, because organizations were not thinking employee first. Organizations were thinking about them as a first, business as the first, which is right. But I think they have to change their orientation to little bit to employee first, which will lead to the employees are getting what they want, what are their aspirations and their need and their alignment. They do have the visibility, which will lead to right kind of information coming out. And when the information is available, people will stop utilizing these methods and sources of capturing the information mentally, and some kind of different kind of methods like Excel sheet based and mechanisms or offline way of knowing the competencies of the people. They will start trusting these tools actually, and that's the right way to scalably solve these problems, right? That's the that is going to answer the uh, medium term and long term goal also for companies to be ready for the futures, because the people who knows today capturing the informations mentally and systematically through some kind of sources, um, I think that is not going to help them with the respect to the futuristic goal and the target or the vision which company does have.
Okay. So, Rahul, this is more from an organizational perspective,
Yeah.
right? From an employee perspective, how aware are employees of this? One. Second, you know, there are these multiple reports that are coming out these days that okay, so cloud computing, SaaS, etc., are the skill sets that are trending today, right? Okay, so they are trending today. You know, I know they're trending today. But how will I, as an employee, contribute to it? Am I skilled enough to do that? Or what is the skill set that I need to grow to be relevant in the next 2 to 3 years? How is that working out from an employee perspective? What
Sure.
is the challenge on that front?
Sure. So I think like that right now the topics which like obviously the previous point which you said the HR systems, internal job boards, right? Today
Hmm.
these are the obviously disconnected systems which they do have actually, right? Obviously one centralized platform has to come into the pictures, which obviously answer will your question as well. But see, I think in a way the personalized job recommendation, right? Obviously will help them to move towards their aspiration, right? Like the trending skill which they are targeting, right? But obviously the immediate certain reskilling, upskilling can happen immediately, certain path can be taken immediately. but but I think there has to be a proper strategy and plan for the reskilling actually by the organization based on the employees need as well. Now first let me speak about the what does organizations think about it, because it's a critical need, because if critical need for organization as well, and that need has come into the picture because of the because they are not able to reduce the workforce, or they are not able to reallocate the resources to the right project, or attritions and the alignment and the automations. Because of that it has forced companies to become employee first, which leads to focusing on reskilling and upskilling actually as an opportunity. Now if I say, like I was looking at one of the McKinsey survey and which talked about 43% of the organizations which says they have skill gap today, the kind of job which are required in the future today, they don't have the right people who can do those jobs actually, which means they do have the skill gaps.
Right.
In next 2 years 22% say they will have the skill gap in the next 2 years, and the remaining 22% says they will have in the next 3 to 5 years actually, and some other percentage people say they do have in more than 6 to 10 years back actually. Now obviously which is a large percentage actually, right? People have to, companies have to focus on the new skill sets, new, and they have to mitigate the need of the um, reskilling and focus on providing the right kind of skill set for people to learn. Now again the way it has to be done by the two ways actually, right? Because if you look at companies, they used to have the internal L&D teams which were, or the competencies team which were very specific, which were helping people to align what kind of skills, the path they do need to take, which, right? That's where one problem did exist actually, because every organization have the limited set of the catalog for people to reskill or upskill their career actually based on their aspiration, and organizations were not giving preference to the preference always actually, right? And due to the lack of informations, like obviously the people also need to have the right kind of environment, right kind of knowledge about the competencies for focus on competencies for reskilling, who should be reskilled, because it was becoming difficult for companies to be designing the personalized reskilling path actually, right? And that's where they have to utilize, because market skills are becoming obsolete, right? These the kind of obsolescence which companies, the skills are going on today, that kind of scenario never has come into the picture in the past actually, and it has because of the automations actually, right? Which means lots of organization, they don't have any choice to remain existing in the current environment or to become better than their competitions. They have to focus on the skill gap. Now if you think from the employee's perspective, right? Employee have certain aspiration, they're looking at the market, and the new kind of skill set is coming. Like for example, people are looking at augmented reality, virtual reality, blockchain, artificial intelligence, analytics, right? All these are the new kind of skill set which has come into the pictures, and the cloud computing, these are becoming their aspiration. Now how can they target those aspiration, and how can they focus on those aspiration? That's where obviously the ideal fulfillment has to happen through some kind of a platform, and that platform has to be highly engaged with the LXPs actually, right? Because previously the approach was taken top to bottom. Now I think it's the right time both the kind of approaches has to be taken into the pictures, because the dynamicity in the environment, like obviously top to bottom, like business leaders are defining what kind of reskilling they do need to enable into the peoples, but employees should also have the freedom to what kind of skill set they do know, they do need to learn actually. And both the kind of skill sets, obviously think about it, because one of the another issue if you do look at as part of the reskilling, every company organization used to have the specialized people actually. Always that was the case. If you talk about in the industry, there are four kind of competencies or models that exist actually. I, which means people are competent or have the competency in one kind of area. T, where people are competent into one kind of area, but they do have the breadth across multiple some other competencies as well. T model, which means people have, pi model, which means people have depth across two competencies, but they do have the breadth also. And com means where people have the competency across multiple other things as well, and the depth on the breadth across multiple skill sets. Now, people have realized, because of the dynamic change of behavior of the automations, companies and employees, they want to move from I to T, or I to pi, or T to pi, or T to comp actually. Normally, if you look at the startup world, or the company which are leading the world in the innovations, they do have the people which belongs to the comp kind of competencies actually, which is great, which we can see the kind of growth which they are creating, the innovation which they are creating for companies to sustain in the future and lead the countries and the world in the new way actually, defining the new dimensions. Now, obviously today like today employee wants to move to the T and pi, and that's where it also cost, right? Because and that's where companies are trying to define that, because the way employee they want to provide transparency, they want to provide the visibility, they want to enable employees to provide the opportunity to work something new, so they can sustain in the new kind of a culture environment. So if this kind of crisis happens, employees are ready to take the lead actually, right? And this reskilling will enable the new leaders. It will help them in the succession planning. It will help them in the reduction of the cost as well. Now think about it. I'm just going to give the example. Today, people are, you hire the specialized people. Now, obviously to work on high value projects, you need the multiple specialization actually, let's say, right? Because today those are the people available. But specialized people are which means too much for the organizations, because if let's say the new kind of a technology got introduced, you again need to bring the two people. But what if the existing individual is feasible to or eligible to learn that technology, or have the aspiration as a new technology? It provide them that kind of environment to learn on the project the new kind of skill sets based on their aspiration and based on the market behavior. That's what the tools should be able to do. Tools should read what is happening in the market, or and what is the need of the organization, what is the need or ambition, aspiration of the people. Based on that, it should enable according to the futuristic professional growth of the individual as well, based on the aspirations and based on the company's need, what are the right skill set and the combination of the skill which they should be focusing on as part of their career growth. But it is see, but this experience will not be enough without having the right kind of LXP into the pictures, because you can create the right kind of recommendation for the skills. You can learn, you can tell people, okay, they can focus, they can learn the artificial intelligence, machine learning, analytics, blockchain, augmented reality, virtual reality, and they can focus on that. But what if there are not the right methods to focus on, not the right courses available as part of the company actually, which means obviously they're still not getting what they need actually, and employees still will leave to choose, they will leave the company actually, right? And but if you have the right kind of a LXP plus this kind of platform, then what happens? It leads to your employee satisfaction. It leads to the most of the positions are getting fulfilled internally, and you can put people into the new roles, because the example which you said, people acquire the cloud computing, people acquire the other skills, now they are ready for the new role, which can be the, let's say for example, architect, let's say, and different for AI product manager, right? And which will help companies to achieve the two things as well, and that's where an employee will become the enabler, and they from past, which was the business was the enabler, but I think employee will be the enabler. They will start taking the control to achieve the two objective for the company to start acquiring the revenue through the new kind, by opening the new kind of channels or the digital unit or business units. Through that they can acquire the new kind of revenue, or it will help them to be ahead of the competition in the futuristic by utilizing the futuristic technology as well actually. And that's where, and which will enable the scalability as well, and it will put the agility as well into the people, and people will automatically proactively start thinking about taking more control and act very quickly in the dynamic environments to increase the growth and benefit for the environment, which means the to create more value for the companies as well, because company in the end both are working for each other.
Obviously. So basically, our of those four concerns, change management and leadership will be addressed.
Yes, yes.
On a very broader scale, on a very higher scale.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Right. So, if I could, if I could say this in a brief, today the skill gap is quite blaring. Organizations don't know which skills. So organizations are basically learning which skills will be useful to them to mark a change, right? To achieve targets and to make profits. And they will also be able to guide the employee in that space. But as of now, it's quite nascent. Both are still learning.
Yes, yes. Like just adding on top of what you said, see, it's happening because for people, if you're taking the people-driven process, it's not easy to build the contextualized learning for each employee, right? Think about the organization size of more than 100,000, 50,000. It becomes very difficult if you are taking a people-oriented approach actually, right? And that's where the platform has to come into the picture, which can solve this problem at the scale actually, because the platform will have the AI, and AI will have the information, or should have the information and intelligence from the market based on the which leads to the future, and look at the ambition which people do have and consider all the factors, right? Today people are thinking about the factors of, let's say, from the organization perspective, or some companies are thinking from the employees perspective, some companies are thinking from the both organization and employees perspective. But I think this environment will help in each company, because of their limitations. It will help them to get all these at the larger scales, very contextualized learning, who can reach to what kind of skill set, who can focus on what kind of skill sets. Because think about, it's very difficult to, if you put two kind of people on the same skill set and they coming out from the different background, the learning will be different actually. You can't put on the same actually, and the timing to get upskilled, reskilled on those skill set will be different. So obviously the right way to achieve and scale it, so which can like there's a skill gap which I was talking about the previous percentage in next 2 years, 2 to 5 years, and that can gap be reduced very quickly in let's say 6 to 12 months to in the time actually, right? And they're ready
That
for the
peak
futuristic.
of the hour, because
Sorry.
the way the because the way environments are changing so swiftly,
Yeah.
right? It is important that organizations take a leap and think of not what is going to happen in 5 year, not what's going to happen 5 years down the line, but basically think of short-term goals.
Yeah.
How can I bridge the gap and achieve my yearly growth easily?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah. Obviously,
it's so
it helps. It,
unprecedented. Yeah, because it's so unprecedented that we never know where it will take us in the next few months, where the
yeah.
situation will be.
Yeah, and what kind of technology will be introduced? So it helps companies to be ready for in the short term, medium term, and the long term and futuristic as well, right? See, we are hearing the news of companies becoming digital ready actually, because
Yes.
certain companies act because of the people which they do have and the technology. They were easy to utilize the technologies very rapidly actually.
Mm-hmm.
And why were they able to do that? Because people were upskilled, reskilled, and the company utilized the technology in such a way it enabled people to be ready in that kind of environment, and people creating more value through the high value created projects actually, right?
Right. So, Rahul, we actually spoke of all the things. We kind of addressed all the four issues one by one, right? Uh, Now, if I could ask you that, what is your take on these versus future workforce? Workplaces we know are changing, and that is the reason organizations are getting employee ready, digital ready, things like that. But what about the workforce? So basically, yes, the workforce is not yet ready. They are not uh, still there. They are aiming to be there. But with the changing workforce also, because if I put it in this context, the current workforce is dominated by the seniors and the millennials, right?
Right.
And the next workforce is the Gen Z, which is similar to the millennial but very different, because reports say that by 2025, one third of the uh, working force will be the Gen Z, who are quite advanced in these aspects, right? So,
Right.
what are the challenges for organizations to deal with that kind of a workforce? What they are getting prepared for is the challenge today to hit the pandemic, in its gut and move forward, uh, hire and acquire skills and competencies to beat that, right? But this is with a specific kind of a workforce. Now,
Right.
with the changing workforce in the next 2 to 3 years, or maybe 5 years, where do we see the industry moving towards?
See, I think obviously looking at the past few points which we have spoken about, looking at companies focusing on HR tools, right, or the products which can solve the problem of data and static records. A platform which are solving internal job boards, platform which are solving the reskilling, upskilling, plus platform which are solving the career path thing and the career progression as a problem statement. I think once organization have this kind of platform onto the company, it will help them to be ready for the and define the future and be ahead of the competitions and define the future as well, right? And that is going to happen because of the workforce and the workforce which will they create actually. Now for example, like the Gen Z workforce which you said, right, which is going to come on board, but I think the way the AI based platform will provide the opportunity to organization and to that workforce to be ready in that kind of environment, and and which will create an environment of ownership, proactiveness, collaboration, and taking the route of mentorship, right? And providing more additional professional and the ad hoc value to the companies actually, right? Because the idea behind is, because when you're going to start acquiring the new kind of talent and you're going to get new kind of people in the company, it is going to put them in the environment, because the company will keep allocating them on the new kind of projects, either helping them to learn the skill sets, or helping them to acquire the few behavioral skills and the competencies, or people are more, because people will be taking the in charge of applying to the jobs actually, right? And applying, getting the skills which they do need. It will enable the kind of culture which will serve the need of the Gen Z workforce, and it will also help companies to become, because they will have the next set of the leaders who are going to start creating the values actually, right? And I think it's going to also change the culture which companies used to have actually, right? Because of certain policies, people were not getting moved across the projects because of the certain policies actually, right? Now the dynamic environment and the quick movement across the projects, and the dynamic, all the dynamic dimensions which company will be taking and the employees will be taking, will help them to be more collaborative, more proactive actually, because they do see the value created by them, for them actually, because in the end value will be returning back to them as part of they are able to focus on the new kind of skill sets actually, which even they can create something out of their personal goal as well.
Right. Right. So I think, we've spoken about all the things, all the situations and scenarios, and the challenges that organizations and employees face today, right? Yes, the future for companies who are developing these AI tools is also great, because they are also uh, learning with constant changes internally, externally, across the pole, right? But one last thing, your take on where do you see uh, the AI organizations who are building these tools go from what they are today, right, to what they need to achieve in the next few years? Where do you see that? This is for organizations who are developing those AI tools. What are their challenges and what is it that they need to move ahead?
Sure. So I think lots of companies are focusing in these particular areas, right? Because they understand the importance of these problems actually, and how important is to mitigate these problems actually, right? So for organizations, the AI-based organization, or let me call it as AI-based talent decision platform, or AI-based talent marketplace products, they have to basically, the challenge for them is the data, right? But I think the challenge will be how they can enable the future. See, always about, I'm just going to take very specifically about machine learning actually. Machine learning is always about learning from the data actually, right? Where and the learning is obviously going to come out from what they do have based on their domain expertise, which are providing the data plus the kind of information which they do have internally, plus what kind of information which they will be getting from their customers or users actually, the quality of that information actually. That is the one challenge actually, right? Second challenge, even if you get that learning, because that learning is coming from the past, right? The challenge for that is how are they going to enable the futuristic vision actually, because the learning is about the past and behavior is changing. How the AI, how fast your AI system react according to the environment is also another challenge actually. And understanding the data, understanding the signals, understanding the information is very much critical to enable the new capabilities. See, today, right now, we're talking about internal job boards, and we are talking about reskilling, upskilling opportunities. We are talking about the career paths, career progressions. We are talking about better normalization of the information, right? But there is something else. That problem may not exist, but is going to come up in the future, right? So that the AI based companies, they have to design their product platform in such a way, by thinking that and by keep crunching the data, digging the data in such a way, it can enable the new capabilities and solve the problem more efficiently and effectively in a very dynamic nature of culture and in environment actually, right? That's what they need to focus on. And obviously um, and that's where I think they have to focus more on building the great product. But that product, that great AI based product or the marketplace or platform will come based on the kind of, by focusing on building the right kind of data based platform, and by acquiring the right kind of talent, resources and people, and technology. They also have to enable more efficient way of utilizing the technology actually, so they can create much more value than that.
Okay, great. So thank you, Rahul. I think we had a very fruitful discussion today, and I believe our viewers will be able to understand and kind of realize what is in store for them through this conversation. Thank you
Yeah,
so much, Rahul. It was a pleasure speaking to you. And thank you so much for all your time that you
thank
spent
you,
with us.
thanks for having me, and I'm grateful. Thank you.